Thank you very much, and I'm really privileged to be invited to be able to give you an update today on where we are on the Hunter-class frigate programme. It's certainly been a journey for us over the last kind of 18 months, and really just thinking back, I think, from what Steve was saying as well, in terms of the chance in Australia. I mean, it's generational really in terms of the money and the new capability that's been brought into the Navy, into the country. And I think whether you're in the Navy, whether you're in industry, it's just a kind of a really great time to be here. So it's some fantastic opportunities for us all. I think also to say for a defence programme, I mean, it was only 18 months ago when Kate and the team actually put the RFP out for Hunter, or C5000. And to actually go from RFP to hold the dates from the RFP going out to the down select and now into the to hopefully we'll be on contract very shortly. That's an incredible kind of timescale, and very, very few, I think, defence contracts around the world actually ever hold those timescales. So I think for both the Navy and for the Commonwealth, that's kind of really great in terms of holding that. It was a great competition. I'd also just like to acknowledge both Fincantieri and Navantia. I mean, there were three great companies. They're all three products, and I think it gave a really good opportunity to look at the capability that was out there in the market. So acknowledgement again to both of those organisations. So what I'd like to give you an update on today is just in terms of the Hunter class, the programme objectives. Talk a little bit about the ship, the product, the reference ship design in the UK and what it's going to be in Australia. Where we are in terms of some of the short-term programme milestones, where we're trying to get to by the end of the year and over the next couple of years. A little bit on this Australian industrial capability, which is at the heart of it. Very much how ASC shipbuilding fits into the Hunter class and into how we're going to operate as BAE Systems. A bit on the digital shipyard, and then if we've got time to take some questions or through the discussion. So in terms of the programme objectives for Hunter class, I think as Steve said in his opening presentation, it's very much about using the programme to establish a continuous naval warship capability in Australia. So this is a very long-term endeavour. It's looking at how we go over the next 30, 40 years to not just build the production and the supply chain knowledge, but also ensure we've got the ability for future ship to be able to design those warships as well in Australia and not necessarily rely on, whether it be European designs or kind of alternative designs. To do that, it's very much about the whole ecosystem. It's not just about the shipyard, and it's certainly not just about BAE Systems. It's about how we develop that supply chain, working with many of you in the room in terms of the partnerships, how we build that capability. So over the next 40, 50 years, we've really invested in the right capability to make sure that Australia can be self-sufficient in terms of the warship capability. And that's a great opportunity. In the UK, we did a similar thing. We signed an agreement probably 10 years ago called the Terms of Business Agreement, and that was the UK's version of how we developed continuous naval shipbuilding capability. And we learned there were some really good things from that, and there were some things that we could have done differently. And I hope we can bring some of that knowledge as well to Australia to see how we're going to do that. Now, very much the first stage of the building the capability is the 9 Hunter-class frigates. And I'll talk a little bit more about those as we got through, because to develop continuous naval shipbuilding capability, clearly you need the programmes and the ability to do that. So the Hunter-class will be at the heart of it. And then the third objective is to make sure we build on some of the great investment that's been put into ASC shipbuilding over the years. And there's some real good capability there, and how we actually make sure we sustain that and build in terms of the great knowledge that's been built on the AWD programme, and make sure we kind of lose that and build on it going forward. So in terms of the ship, the Type 26 is the reference ship for the Hunter class, which is the UK design. The ship very much was designed kind of keel upwards for anti-submarine warfare, and that means she's a very acoustically quiet ship. So every component on it, the design does make sure that we can get the lowest noise, the lowest and the highest capability in terms of the submarine hunting. But when we started off with the Type 26, again, going back 6 or 7 years ago, it was designed to be flexible, so it could be far more than a submarine hunting frigate. It could be capable of whether it's kind of air warfare, whether it's humanitarian operations, and very much it could be adapted for a global market. So we kind of designed it in mind, hoping that we would have opportunities such as the Hunter class and such as where we're looking in Canada, so we can take a reference ship design and actually use that to evolve it for individual nations. The UK programme is going to be for 8 ships. She cut steel in June 17 on Ship 1, and the UK programme is running about 5 years ahead of the Australian programme. So June 17 when she cut steel, and will cut steel, or full production will commence in Australia on Hunter in 2022. So the 5-year gap is a really good opportunity to allow the base design to be de-risked in the UK, but also to make sure that we've got a continuous supply chain and a continuous production line, which gives some really good learning opportunities and training opportunities as well. So that's a pretty good time frame to work with. The UK contract is a framework contract for 8 ships, of which the first 3 have been priced and under contract. So in terms of the Hunter class, really the objective is minimal changes where we can from the reference ship. There's some key ones, and most of those are above the flight deck, and I think Steve and Admiral Mead talked about. I mean, the big changes really are the CFAR radar, and that's going to bring a fantastic capability. I think you've got a fantastic radar there in terms of Australia, so putting that onto the ship is going to give it really enhanced capability. We'll be putting in the Aegis combat system and the Saab Australian interface, so that will give a different combat system design. So the UK ship is European missiles, MBDA, this is going to be US missile system. So she's going to have a really powerful and great capability in terms of the kind of above weapon, the above water capability. Different helicopter in terms of making sure for the MH-60 Romeo. But other than that, it really is, we're going to try and keep as much commonality, and the reason for keeping as much commonality is that's going to de-risk, so we're not starting a complete first of class. As Steve said, there's lots of risks in terms of the enterprise in workforce mobilisation, so the more stability we can keep in the design, then that's going to be better. So in terms of the combat system, very much there's some great capability in Australia. We're in the middle of a competition at the moment to help bring in some partners to support us with that. So with Raytheon, with Lockheed and with Saab, we're looking at how we bring that capability. And it's very much about building on the capability that's already in Australia rather than starting from scratch. So that's the basis of the ship, and she really will be a fantastic capability to complement what you've got in the air warfare destroyers. So in terms of milestones, the next couple of years is really design and mobilisation. So a lot to do at the moment in terms of mobilising the programme office. I'm less worried about I think in terms of mobilising for production, I think there's some good capability, some great capability in Australia. The key thing we've got to do is make sure we're mobilising the kind of programme office, the programme managers, the schedules, the supply chain. That's really kind of what we need to do over the next few years there. So there'll be mobilisation. We then commence prototyping in Techport in the Shipyard in 2020 for a couple of years, and that's more than just prototyping the build side. We'll be prototyping some new systems, how we bring in some of the new capabilities, and I think that's a really sensible objective and part of the plan that the Commonwealth and the Navy put in to allow, before we go straight into full production, to allow a couple of years when we can really test some of the systems, the processes, the people side, to make sure that we're in good shape there. And then full production will commence in 2022. And as I said, that gives us about a 5-year overlap with the UK, which is pretty good. So in terms of short term, what we've got to do, you'll have seen from the announcement, so ASC Shipbuilding is going to become part of BAE Systems Australia. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. I think that's some really fantastic opportunities in terms of doing that, and we've got to work out how we transfer. We're in the process of how we transfer that capability and the company into BAE to make sure we protect both the AWD, the OPV, and allow us to move into the Hunter class. We need to conclude the contract negotiations, so I see Kate's in. With Kate's team, we're working pretty hard in terms of doing that, and I think we're all hoping we'll have the first stage of the contract in place shortly, so I think that's going really well. Mobilising the programme, we've just got to continue to do that. I've got something like 150 people, and I think the way it built through the scheduled protection activity, but clearly, you know, as we go through over the next 7 or 8 years, the Hunter class will kind of create and sustain about 5,000 jobs. So I think very much as Steve said in his presentation, you know, the risks in terms of 1, 2 and 3 are around mobilisation and making sure we get that right capability. So a lot of work that we're doing there. A lot of engagement with the supply chain. With many of you in the room, we worked, you know, pretty hard with you over the last kind of 12 or 18 months. And it's now important that as we start getting the supply chain on contract, but we also understand how we kind of Australianise that as much as possible, so we bring the maximum amount of capability into Australia. And we'll be moving into a new facility in Adelaide CBD over the kind of next 4 or 5 weeks, and that will allow us to fully mobilise the programme team. The team will be based out of Australia, and then that programme team will move into Techport, into the shipyard in Adelaide, as soon as the space becomes available there, probably around 2020. So very much this will be Australian team in Australia and managed from Australia. In terms of Australian capability, as well as I think, you know, the Hunter class will be a great capability for the Navy, it's really important, as I say, back to that first objective of the Hunter class, that we make sure we maximise the capability in Australia. So working with the supply chain, so in a number of areas we've got to make sure for the big components that we don't want to put brand new gearboxes, you know, new diesel generators, new kind of gas turbines in. But what we do want is those suppliers on the UK programme to work with Australian industry so we can get the maximum content. And we got some great proposals through around 20 of the OEMs of how they're really going to make sure that capability moves to Australia. And then many of the other suppliers where we can use form, fit and function, the same components and services, we'll use Australian suppliers for. So a lot of work there, and we'll continue with that over kind of coming months and years. It's not just about the supply chain, you know, it's also how we invest in kind of capability, training, working with the kind of National Shipbuilding College. You know, we're looking at early careers programs, so for apprentices, graduates, so how we can really invest in that, and also working with kind of universities and academia as well. So an awful lot to do in terms of that, but very much we see developing the capability is what, you know, one of the key roles that the Hunter class programme needs to do. ASC shipbuilding, as we talked about, it was something that wasn't planned. I mean, I guess it was something that all 3 tenders were asked a couple of months before the down select to look at how could we work closer and how could we kind of acquire the ASC shipbuilding business. And I think as soon as we were kind of, we were asked if that would be something that, you know, BAE Systems Australia would fully support, it just seemed really obvious to us. So to be able to get that capability and to understand the workforce and all that capability that's been built through the air warfare destroyers, to kind of make sure we don't lose all of that. So we thought that was, you know, we really saw that as a great foundation to build from the shipyard. So the physical shipyard will remain under Commonwealth ownership, but the workforce, the management team, they will transfer into BAE Systems. And again, they will very much become, that's where we'll build the basis of the Hunter class capability from. So the air warfare destroyers and the OPVs, those contracts won't come into BAE Systems. What we will operate is a kind of a labour hire business out to either the Alliance or into the other parts of ASC where they'll hold the contract. So what we've got to do is we transition it over, and we're really conscious that this is a great point to build the foundation from in terms of the Hunter class, but we must make sure we respect and support the AWD programme and the OPV programme, so we make sure that they deliver the capability that it needs to do. So I think there's a really good opportunity really good progress with Department of Defence and Department of Finance in terms of how we transition that over. And again, I think that will allow us a great foundation to build from in terms of the Hunter side. I think there's a lot of talk about the digital side, digital shipyard. I think one thing we did when we designed Type 26 in the UK, it is a digital design. And that means that a lot of the capability from traditional, certainly in shipbuilding programs, we'd have design, we'd have bills of materials, we'd have data in many, many different databases. And it's really difficult to kind of keep configuration control of that. Having a digital design and all of those, all of the kind of material knowledge of supply chain, of parts, of component, in one place, it just makes it so much easier and will give huge benefits through life. It allows us to kind of, not just in terms of the shipyard, but work with the supply chain, how we can work in kind of visualization suites. A number of you will have seen the digital design, the visualization capability that we've got. And I think certainly what this will allow us to do, we're only scratching the surface in the UK in terms of the long-term capability. But in terms of how we'll be able to kind of manage the ships through life, how we'll be able to work with the supply chain, there's some real benefits in terms of what that capability will allow us to do. So really, just to bring to the end of the presentation, I think there's a fantastic commitment from both the Commonwealth and the Royal Australian Navy. I think the world looks in envy to say, if you can be a part of helping to deliver this capability and the ships, whether the submarines, whether it's the OPVs, whether it's the frigates. But to deliver it, and again, I think Steve said in his presentation, the only way this endeavour will be delivered will be a true partnership, and that's a partnership between industry, government, and the Navy. It is complex, kind of building submarines, building the frigates, we'll be building in the same yard, in the same time scales, with similar workforces. How we operate and how we behave and collaborate as kind of part of the supply chain, that will probably be the difference in terms of whether this is successful or not. And certainly, our commitment as BAE Systems Australia is to make sure we play our role in terms of doing that. It is a generational opportunity for the shipbuilding industry, whether it's Navy or in the supply chain, and it really does give us the chance to invest in capability for the long term. I mean, this programme will run for 30 years and, kind of then the ships will be in service for another 30 years. So we really can invest in, whether it's the young people, whether it's the supply chain, and we should make sure we take, full advantage in terms of that. Hunter will be a great capability, and I'm also hoping that, there is opportunities that we'll end up with a true kind of Five Eyes frigate. Canada, I hope, will make a decision as well by the end of the year, and we've got the Type 26 reference ship also in the Canadian competition. So if we are successful there, then that will give, across the Royal Australian Navy, the Royal Navy in the UK and the Canadian Navy, a lot of commonality, and I think that gives some real benefits as well. And I think the decision to kind of keep ASC and to move ASC as the foundation and integrate with BAE Systems was a great choice from the Commonwealth, and I think that will give us some great advantages as well. So thank you very much, and I've got a few minutes to take any questions before the discussion.